You know, I think it goes without saying at this point that Cars, as a franchise, means a hell of a lot to me. The third movie was a beautiful bookend to the main character Lightning McQueen's story. The original film helped to shape so much of my childhood, and Cars 2 is like that estranged brother who we don't like talking about around these parts. But anyways, I've made so many memories and so many friends thanks to Cars. I've followed almost every exciting new development related to the series, no matter how minor. I can name basically every character off the top of my head, and I've been collecting the Mattel 155 scale diecast line for as long as I can remember. For God's sake, I have decals of obscure racing sponsors like little torquey pistons plastered up on my wall. If that doesn't scream to you, I really give a shit about Cars, then I don't know what will. I don't know where I'd even be today without Cars, yet despite it being my favorite franchise of all time, I don't regularly talk about it on the channel, not as of recently that is. So let's change that today, as I give my thoughts on the latest installment in the Cars saga, Cars on the Road. You can also view this video as a sort of Kickstarter for whenever I eventually look back on all three movies. But with that all out of the way, let's travel forward on this journey, shall we? Cars on the Road is a 9-episode Disney Plus series following Mater and McQueen as they embark on a cross-country road trip to reach the East Coast for Mater's sister's wedding. Yeah, Mater's got a sister, folks, and her name is Mato. Get it? Like tomato, but without the "t"? I love that naming callback. And as you'd expect, the two friends fall into various colorful situations along the way, and hijinks ensue. Before this show came out, it had actually been a long time since the last major canonical Cars release, so the existence of this show was really something worth celebrating. I myself was excited, as you'd expect, but also a little bit skeptical and concerned, partially from looking at the bizarre concept art, and also from knowing just how many other franchises have gone past their prime and fallen apart prior to this. I began to worry that this series would cause Cars to become a big joke to the general public again, and would end up following a similar pattern in quality to that of Thomas the Tank Engine, another series I've always held closely to my heart. But alas, Cars on the Road finally released, and me not having a Disney Plus account meant that I had to initially watch it through online clips and reaction videos. Yeah, not the best first viewing, I know. To my surprise, however, the show received favorable enough reviews, and now here we are, wondering how I personally feel about the show. Do I agree with the response from most fans and critics, or is it just another franchise's downfall? Well, with this video, I'll first share what I liked about the show, then go over what didn't exactly work for me. Yes, there are problems with the show, I'll get to them. And wrap up with my final thoughts. Oh, and in case you were wanting an arbitrary episode ranking, here you go, I guess. Okay, first thing I want to get out there is that I like the concept for this show. A road trip between two of the most beloved characters in this wacky world of Cars is a good direction to take this franchise moving forward, even though it wouldn't have been the first idea I'd want to go with for a Cars show. Admittedly, it does make me miss the Radiator Springs gang, especially with how incredibly shafted they were in this, only appearing at the very beginning of the first episode. But it does give the more important character dynamics a little more time to shine again. Speaking of which, the strongest aspect of this show, in my opinion, and what is definitely the heart and soul prevailing through all of it, is the friendship between Mater and McQueen, which was very wholesome and even handled quite realistically most of the time, without feeling like it's forced or making you question why these two are friends at all. The duo really does make this show a heck of a lot better than it already was, and I'm glad to say that neither of the two's personalities were utterly wrecked beyond repair. Like, they didn't completely revert back into their earlier selves, nor were they turned into totally oblivious dumbasses either. Instead, their fellow camaraderie and true selves are on full display here, and it's a joy just seeing them chit-chat on their travels together, lifting each other's spirits up, discussing where they want to stop at next, and always managing to have each other's back.
So where to next? The Caverns of Mystery, or the Giant Muffler of Mystery, or how about the world's largest corn palace of mystery?
Which one's the most educational?
What? Aren't you scared you might learn something?
Shoot, I ain't scared of nothing.
Not to mention, we learn new things about them too. We learn of Mater's origins and basically meet some of his family, along with discovering that he wishes to do something better than McQueen for once. We're also shown that McQueen has a fear of clowns, a fascination with prehistoric life, and a strong desire to be featured in a movie. Those last two in particular for me. Relatable, am I right, guys? Woohoo! Anyways, on a more technical note, the animation here is absolutely dazzling. I'd say it's almost on par with the feature-length movies, despite some of the sets feeling kinda plain at times, and something else we will get to later. From the characters' movements to the lighting, it's all very pleasant to the eyes, which is quite relieving considering some of the shit that you can easily find on Disney Plus now. The voice acting is pretty top-notch, with the exception of Griswold, who I honest to God found baffling.
They're emptying him!
The humor manages to get a good amount of chuckles out of me.
That's cold. They didn't even try to save me.
And the many shenanigans Mater and McQueen find themselves in are oftentimes pretty entertaining. From Mad Max references to circus stunt performers, Salt Flats racers to musical numbers, it's all a real racetrack treat. Minus the racetrack element, unfortunately. And I can totally see why some of the new characters this series has introduced have become fan favorites. Jake Monaco's soundtrack in this usually just gets the job done, but there are times where it really stands out and feels fresh and new and different for the Cars series. I particularly love that song that plays in the end credits of Getting Hitched, by the way. That one always warms my heart. And lastly, whether it be intentional or not, I appreciate how with this show, Pixar managed to further tell me at least that Cars 2 is not canon, and will indeed be ignored going forward, and thank God for that.
I've always wanted to go faster and fast, and shoot, right now I got a pretty good shot at it. Whoa, it's coming down.
While we're on the topic of things that are not good, let's now get into what I personally didn't care for with this show. Now, despite how fun Cars on the Road can be, and trust me, it can be pretty dang fun, I do have a lot of issues with it. And sadly, they're the more important factors that I need to bring up here. The narrative itself, for one thing, left a lot to be desired. Throughout this show, it often feels like things are just happening, without much connective tissue tying each episode together. I did bring up all those plentiful character motivations earlier, yes, but it feels like they didn't really do enough with them. A lot of plot elements and story arcs are, for the most part, secluded to their own individual episodes and sort of pop in or out of existence whenever needed, sometimes without any satisfying payoff. And as a result, the show comes off as somewhat disjointed and even first drafty. For instance, at the end of one episode, Mater and McQueen are continuing forward on their journey on good terms, and then at the start of the next episode, they're at each other's throats. It's really jarring. Had there been simply a more overarching plot, I think that Mater's sweet message at the end would have packed even more of a punch. I also believe that the show would have benefited from a longer running time, as there are moments where the pacing rushes itself, not allowing the new characters or locations to get enough focus. For example, in Cars 3, we spend enough time in Thunder Hollow for us to fall in love with the Demo Derby crew. Meanwhile, in Salt Fever, it seems like we're speeding through everything, right when we're starting to become interested. While a good handful of the ideas present here are quite creative, or feel like a natural progression of the Cars world, several of them feel very superficial and gimmicky, as if they were made with the mindset of, what typical TV show tropes have we not used for an episode yet? which can end up leading to moments of light or even extreme immersion-breaking absurdity, where the show absolutely jumps the submarine whale car wash, wandering past that line of believability a little too far. And as a result, the characters' ridiculous antics leave you questioning, okay, how much of this is actually happening right now? What is even going on anymore? Ah! It also doesn't help that there was a clear disregard for making sure everything in this show made logical sense within the Cars continuity, which sometimes kinda hurts. Like, I can forgive lines such as, "We're both racers now," as I just interpret that like how Mario Andretti or River Scott are still technically racers, they're just no longer racing. And then you can apply that same sort of thing to McQueen here. But then there's the whole dinosaur inconsistency, which it seems no one else besides me wants to acknowledge. I'm also not too keen on how the supporting cast was handled in this. I do actually like Ivy herself, but I have to ask, why does her backstory imply that she was encouraged to kill other cars? Excuse me? Like, why couldn't they have just made this another Mater the Greater stunt? Would have worked just as well and could have resulted in the same accident. But more importantly, she splits ways with McQueen and Mater right after they met her, only for them to randomly bring her back out of nowhere in the B-movie episode. Like, why?
Why?
Cruz as well got the short end of the stick. For some godforsaken reason, they pushed her appearance back to the final episode with the most convenient excuse imaginable. And I really don't like how they used her as nothing but a tool for whatever the story needed her to be, just because it's so goddamn funny, I guess. You know, it's really irking going from Cars 3, where you can tell they put a lot of time and care into getting Cruz right, to this. Not at all impressed. I'm also sure that I speak for a ton of people here when I say that the show was severely lacking in returning characters, barring Cruz and the Radiator Springs gang, of course, especially after they majorly clickbaited us about it leading up to release. I'm not asking for endless fan service cameos here or anything, the MCU has taught me the dangers of doing that, but can we not just get one episode devoted solely to old characters? Not even one? I actually at one point thought we were gonna get an episode where McQueen and Mater stumble upon the delinquent road hazards, followed by McQueen being challenged to a drift race by them. Just imagine how cool that could have been. But nah, we can't focus an entire episode around that. We wouldn't be able to make any new toys out of it. But now, it's time to finally address the screaming banshee in the room, the part you've all probably been waiting for, the reused character models. This is something that has bothered a lot of people in the Cars fandom, and I just simply have to agree, to an extent. Look, I totally understand the limitations that would have been placed upon the animators due to time and budget constraints. Heck, they've been doing this forever, and it's not like it's a huge deal or anything, since in real life you will see the same pickup trucks and sedans everywhere you go. Plus, I don't mind it in certain cases, like with the Cryptid Hunters, as those are just reusing obscure background assets only the fans would recognize. But it's once you get to crap like the Three Fishtails, the Endless Guidos, or MC, that it really starts to become a distraction.
A clone army, and I must say, one of the finest we've ever created.
And it especially sucks for us diecast collectors. No one wants to be given the same stuff recycled over and over again. Oh, and that reminds me, the final issue I want to bring up with this show, which isn't really something at the fault of Pixar, it's just a Disney and Mattel problem it seems, is that they did not market this thing or distribute its merchandise as well as they should have from the start. I know this isn't as prominent of a project as like Cars 3, but to paraphrase what my dearest gaming magic once said, I'd be surprised if more than, 300 people were aware of Cars on the Road's existence? Okay, I'm exaggerating there, but you get my point. My local Target, for instance, only got in like 3 different On the Road singles in stock last year, along with a couple other things. Yikes. There are other nitpicky things and little missed opportunities to be found with Cars on the Road, but I don't think they're really prominent enough for me to bring them up in detail here. And that basically concludes my complaints with the show. Many of these little issues I brought up could have so easily been avoided that it's frustrating at times, and I do think that the Unlucky Tug's treatment of the show is miles better than what we actually got. The only mainline installment that I find Cars on the Road better than would be Cars 2. But like, that's not really saying much of anything now, is it? And don't for a second try telling me that this is better than movie number 1 or 3. That's just flat out wrong. While I still did somewhat overall enjoy this series, I wouldn't be telling the truth if I said I wasn't a little bit disappointed by it, and that I didn't think Pixar could have tried any harder with it. It doesn't have to be super deep, serious, or introspective to be good. That's not what I'm asking for or expecting. But even for a goofy adventure, Cars on the Road did leave me feeling a bit unsatisfied. Looking at it from a critical standpoint, it's fine. It's really just some inconsequential brand extension. It's content that exists to feed Cars fans and Disney Plus subscribers. But from a lifelong Cars fan's perspective, or at least from my perspective, it's pretty alright. I like Cars on the Road, and while I do feel obligated to put "like" in quotes there, I've indeed welcomed this show into the ongoing Cars legacy, as evident by me still purchasing new On the Road diecast releases. Please give me Cryptid Buster McQueen. Please give me Cryptid Buster McQueen. That being said, the problems I have with this show are still very much so present, and do detract majorly from its quality for me, to the point where I don't find myself really wanting to rewatch it that often, unlike the main films. However, I definitely don't view this as the death of the Cars franchise, but rather the potential start of something better. I do sincerely believe we will end up getting a Season 2 of Cars on the Road, or something else related to Cars at some point, and as long as they can step up their game just a bit next time, I'm all for it. Go forward with it, Pixar. Cars truly did help to shape my childhood, and above all other things, I simply want the newest Cars content to continue to help build the childhoods of today's generation of kids. Just please, Pixar, do not make Cars 4. Don't let that be a reality. My heart would not be able to take it.